Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections brought to you by Captain Morgan. And today we are looking at Devin Singletary and Rakeem Nunez-Roches, otherwise known as Nacho. But we're going to start with Devin Singletary, the Giants' new starting running back, 5'7", 230 pounds. He'll be 27 years old when the season starts. He signed a 3-year, $16.5 million contract, up to $19.5 million with $9.5 million guaranteed. So essentially 2 years guaranteed, 5.5 average annual value. It's a middle of the road running back contract, Justin. He was the Bills' third-round pick in 2019 and was their starter for 4 years, went to Houston and became their starter midseason. And for the first time since 2018, the Giants have someone at their starting running back spot other than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and for me personally, this is a welcome sign. I am welcoming Devin Singletary with open arms. And Bobby, I'm going to be honest, I think Singletary is the perfect back to test out this do the Giants need an absolute advantage at running back question, at least for Brian Daboll, because I mean this with the utmost respect and intention of liking Devin Singletary. If you, at least you look at his basic stats like yards per carry, he's average, and I don't think you could find a more average back. We're going to talk about some more advanced stuff where Devin Singletary kind of separates himself, but really, Devin Singletary screams average, and I'm going to tell you what, the Giants are paying for that, maybe a little bit above average, which I would say Devin Singletary is a little bit of an above average running back, but you want to know what? That's fine for this offense.
Well, I think he is an above average back, and I think that in the way that he is efficient, right? Like at the end of the day, the best way to describe Singletary is efficient,
yes.
Right? Like he's had more yards per carry than Saquon in every single season. Even in 2019 when Singletary was third in yards per carry in his rookie year.
Higher success rate.
Yeah, but last year, and again, that's a sign of running backs behind offensive lines, right? And offensive lines being a part of run game health. Last year he had 900 yards on 4.2 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. The year before with Buffalo, 820 yards on 4.6 yards per carry. And then the year before that, 870 for 4.6 yards per carry. Like he's been pretty steady in his output, right? In between 30 and 40 catches, which is between, 180 and 280 receiving yards. So what he is a good gap scheme runner. He can work in zone, but he's a gap runner, and he's good in the short area agility and elusiveness. Like he's a make you miss in a phone booth type stuff, right? Just really one cut, make you miss, and then get up a field. Like he's really legit in that stuff, especially in the hole at the second level. That's where Singletary is his best.
Quick stat for you in regards to that. This is per Doug Analytics. Doug Analytics dug up some really good stats on Devin Singletary when we signed him. Singletary has the second most missed tackles due to a definitive cut, and I think the film backs that up. Like you see the one cut and go. Yeah, the one cut and then get north and south, and even the stats back that up. If he's been all right, he's been decent in efficiency according to Next Gen Stats, which measures are you a north-south runner, and the sixth most forced tackles caused by what is called a power move. So I think he is a gritty running back as well.
Yeah, he's he's got pretty good contact balance as well. Like I think he has underrated power. And he's been middle of the road as far as yards after contact. It was 18th in last year, 2 spots behind Saquon, 17th in 2022, actually 5 spots ahead of Saquon, and then he was 10th both in 2021 and 2020. I don't think we're going to get top 10 from him.
No.
Specifically, behind the Giants offensive line. So he's good in the 0 to 10 yard range, right, which is efficient. He doesn't have the home run speed, right? He can he can turn 5 yards into 10 yards, but he's just not going to turn 15 yards into a touchdown. His longest career run is 51 yards. His longest run of last year was 24 yards, right? So to have 900 yards last year and the longest one be 24, he's very much go get me 5 to 10 yards every type of, that's what your goal is between every down. Get me 5 to 10 yards, and he's done that well his entire career.
Yeah, and even since 2019, and again, this is from Doug, Devin Singletary ranked 11th among running backs with 300-plus rushing attempts since 2019 at plus 0.5 rushing yards over expected per attempt. Now, I think that's interesting because if you look at least according to Next Gen, his rushing yards over expected per rush attempt year by year, the best that he's done since 2020 is 17th. It's been positive every single year, which is great, which goes in lines with, around being average. But if you put it all together since 2019, and I think this is the key part, it's consistently good, and it's 11th, and that's obviously very close to being top 10. You'll see a lot of running backs. Even take Travis Etienne, for example. 2022, one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. absolutely fell off in the rushing yards over expected category the next year. Tyler Algier is another example. 2022, one of the most efficient and best running backs in the NFL, and the efficiency, at least with the over expected metric, fell off absolutely the next year. So I'm excited to see Devin Singletary. You know what you're getting from him.
Yeah,
that's what makes me very excited.
There's no like outlier years, right, like in any of the numbers, and he's been essentially the same player most of his career.
Yep.
His best year efficiency was his rookie season, but like, you know, they drafted Zach Moss to, you know, be the starter over him, and then they ended up, you know, drafting James Cook, who, you know, took over that role, and he's been better than Devin Singletary. But Singletary's been that one back for every team he's been on, right? Houston wanted it to be Dameon Pierce, and at some point they're like, all right, let's
pull the plug early.
Yeah, you know, let's move to Devin Singletary. Now, he's not your workhorse back either, right? He's always been a running back by committee type of player. Like, he gives you 11 carries per game, right? And we're going from, you know, the last 5 years where our running back gave us about, you know, 16 to 18 carries per game.
I think we can get up to 13, 14. I think we can. And that, you know, that goes back to our over-unders episode where I think if that number is down to 10, 11 attempts per game, then I think he hits the under. What do we have, Devin Singletary, over under rushing yards?
I think it was 51.5.
Or 50 rushing yards per game. It was 55.
Yeah, it was.
It was 55.
I think he's only done that once in his career.
Right. So I went over, you went under. And my argument was if he does get 13, 14 carries a game, I think he will get it. But that is that number around 11 to 13, 14, that's where I think he's going to wind up getting this year in terms of attempts per game.
Yeah, and I'm looking up some
which is a obviously it's less than what Saquon Barkley got as you said.
Yeah, I think they're going to try and establish a second back, whether that's Tyrone Tracy or Eric Gray. Probably Tyrone Tracy, right? And Tyrone Tracy gives you more third down value than Devin Singletary.
But the good thing about that is it's not going to hopefully it's not going to be because Devin Singletary isn't performing. It's going to be, hey, let somebody else take over that number 2 running back, whether it is Tracy, Gray. Let them kind of earn it, get those reps, and Singletary is going to be what Singletary is.
Yeah. And let's talk about him in the receiving game, right? It's pretty much like a baseline average back there, right? Like he has good hands. You know, he's a functional, but he's just not a plus receiver. You know, really the only time you see him have good plays in the receiving game is as a screen, right? And that's not the sign of a good receiving back. That's the sign of someone who can run behind blocks.
I will say,
and he's given two catches per game essentially for his career, and he has improved as a blocker, so you can keep him on the field for all 3 downs.
Did you see Texans-Titans game last year where C.J. Stroud was not out, and they had a game-winning drive, and the game-winning drive was not the quarterback throwing the ball. It was Devin Singletary. Well, Devin Singletary catching the football out of the backfield where quarterback has to improvise. He's holding the ball for a really long time. And then Singletary kind of is on the sideline, then comes back to the middle of the field. It's a big yak play. There's another 5-yard gritty run that's included in there. And then what would have been a game-winning touchdown if it wasn't for a bogus holding call, if you want to go back to that Texans-Titans game, I believe it was the Texans home game. Devin Singletary technically has like a walk-off game-winning touchdown, but it was like a bogus wide receiver holding call. And it was a big play. And that drive, that game-winning drive that did set up a game-winning Texans field goal, that was on the back of Devin Singletary. So that was one of the more impressive moments of his season. I also thought that he had a tough, gritty playoffs as well, that he was able to shine on a national stage like that.
For projection, 52 yards per game in a full season would be 884 yards. Do you think he gets to 900 rushing yards this year? If you had an over on 55, I guess the answer would be yes.
Yeah, I this is a Giants' offensive identity topic as well. I do think the Giants at some point, whether it's because of the health of the quarterback or the Daniel Jones's lack of ability to really sustain a good passing offense, I do think there will be a point this year where we do lean on the run a little bit more than maybe Brian Daboll wants to so far this summer.
Here's the thing is I do think it goes under, one, because I think the Giants are going to try and lean into what their wide receivers do. And also with, there's games where, when Saquon was out where they just didn't want to run the ball at all, right? Like even San Fran, I think Matt Breida had 4 carries in that game.
Yeah.
So I think overall he ends up below that 55 yard per game marking and probably gets right around what he gets every single year, which is 850 rushing yards. Right, his last 3 years 898, 819, 870. I think he gets at 850. I think they want to give whoever their RB2 ends up being some snaps, and I think there'll be those games where they're just not running the ball at all. Whereas Saquon, even if the passing game was worked, there was always in their mind, all right, we got to get Saquon his touches. We got to get Saquon his touches. Even to a fault, even in the good year of 2022 when there was that stretch of just Saquon's not efficient right now because of the way teams are playing.
Yeah, we were advocating them, like, please throw on early
and
downs.
For that, they're like, okay, well, we're just going to get him involved in a lot of swing passes. You're really not doing that you're not going out of your way to make sure Devin Singletary's getting his touches on an offense like this. So I think he gets around 800 to 850 rushing yards this year.
I do think, I don't know the Texans' offensive line like the back of my hand, but they were hurt at certain points last year. And we won't know obviously we don't know the health of the Giants' offensive line. But I do think like this Giants' offensive line this year, especially if you're not including Evan Neal at right tackle, I think this is a sneaky good run blocking offensive line.
Yeah, again, 1 or 2 injuries, just like what Houston dealt with last year, can throw that all into,
of course, just like anything,
an issue. But if, like you said, if Elmanor is at right tackle, you kind of got 5 guys who have started a lot of games and can run a functional running off. They're not going to be there's no world where we're ending this season like, man, this is just one of the best rushing teams in the NFL.
No,
but I think it can be what Devin Singletary has been his entire career: efficient.
Yep.
All right, Justin, before we get into the next player, why don't you talk to us about something?
Oh, I'll talk to you about something, Bobby Skinner. And we're going to talk to you about the captain, Captain Morgan. Hey, Saquon Barkley was a captain last year. Do you think Devin Singletary's going to have the C on his shirt? That'd be pretty funny.
He'll have some Captain Morgan in his house.
He's also wearing 26. You know who else wore 26? Captain Morgan. They're the official spiced rum of the NFL. With the NFL season upon us, you need the right players in the right place. And you want to know what? Giants are changing things up. They're spicing things up by not having Barkley on the team anymore, and they're bringing in Motor Singletary. How do you like that? Spiced Motor.
Motorin'.
And when it gets bland, try Captain Morgan Original Spiced Rum. It's delicious and crisp, perfect for game day with friends. You gotta spice it up. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Please drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Original Spiced Rum, 35% alcohol by volume. Captain Morgan Rum Company, New York, New York. You'll be glad you did. Thank you to Captain Morgan for sponsoring our entire summer.
You'll be glad you did. Shout out the summer. Rakeem Nunez-Roches, defensive tackle, otherwise known as Nacho. So that's how we will refer to him as the rest, so we don't have to say 3 names. 6'2", 307 pounds. He's 31 years old now. Last offseason, he signed a 3-year, $12 million deal with 7.5 of it guaranteed. He was coming off of a season where he had 33 tackles, 5 tackles for loss as a rotational player. Last season, 26 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, and a half sack. He's going to be put in a lot bigger role, right? Like, he was the first free agent they signed in 2022. They had a clear and defined role for him. But, you traded away Leonard Williams. You lost A'Shawn Robinson, and really the only guy you brought into this group is Jordan Phillips, who, hey, we're at camp and we're not seeing a ton of him. And Nacho is getting, he's the first guy out there. It's going to be interesting to see how, one, they handle this position at all, but how, they handle Nacho, who's their number 2 guy next to Dexter Lawrence, and he's a guy who's never played 50% of the snaps for a season. Never. Like, his career high was 49% in 2022 when the Giants signed him. And now he's most likely their starter day one.
Yeah. The disappearance of Jordan Phillips is something to really behold so far this summer. We try not to talk a lot about camp, but it is impacting Rakeem Nacho's role, like heading into this year. And the thing is that I tried to really, I knew that I wasn't going to have many notes on Nacho heading into this, Bobby. So what I tried to do before we recorded this is, hey, let me check some run defense stuff, advanced stuff on PFF. Run stop rate. We know he's not going to lead the league in run stops because he only played 44% of the snaps that he was eligible to play in, right? I had that memorized on the top of my head. 44% of the snaps that he was eligible to play in. So let me check run stop rate. Is he at least average? No, he's kind of down there around 5%. The average depth of tackle. Hey, maybe he's really pushing. He's getting a good push, and maybe it's down to like 2 or 3. Now it's like mid 4s, and it's like second highest in the league of average depth of tackle. So there wasn't even really anything advanced that you can go to. But I'm not going to sit here and say Nacho's bad. I think he's a solid run defender.
He's a good run. Like he's an athletic run defender who, like, he plays with his hair on fire. He plays with he'll fire into the chest of an offensive lineman and just work to steer those blocks.
But you usually like to try and find something on a player. It's like, oh, look at this little nugget that I can tell you that's like interesting for Nacho, makes him stand out. I don't really have that right now.
Yeah, well, I think as a starter, because again, even the starter on this team next to Dexter Lawrence is probably won't even like get 50% of the snaps. If at highest like 55%. But what I want from him is what he did in 2022 for Tampa Bay, right, where he had 20 run stops that year. It would have been third on the Giants that year after Dexter Lawrence and Jalen Smith. Where last year, and this is all right with his playing time, he had 11, right, which was tied 7th on the team with Leonard Williams, who was traded, and Jason Pinnock. If he gets 20, I think he'll probably be 4th on this team after Okereke, Dexter Lawrence, and Micah McFadden, and that'd
be great.
That's where I want him, and that's the exact number he did in 2022 with Tampa, and I don't see why he can't do that. And this is again going to be a defense that allows their front to be more aggressive in what they're doing.
Yeah, 36 interior defensive linemen last year got 20 run stops, so that would be I would be very, very cool if Nacho winds up right around there. Yeah,
I think that's the goal. It's not big, lofty goals, but as the starter, that's what. As a starter who's only a run defender, like I think he's don't need 9-10 tackles for a loss, right? He had 5 the year before, 1 last year, but just be someone who does their job in the run game, plays with that intensity every single down, and makes it tough to run block, right? Like I think it's as simple as that. If he doesn't, then you're looking in other areas because he doesn't give you anything as a pass rusher.
No.
Right? Like he doesn't have any quick initial wins. Like he's got an average get off. He doesn't have, good hand moves that he goes to or anything. He just gives you nothing as a pass rusher, right? Like last year for defensive tackles, he was 94th out of 98 in pass rush productivity, 92nd out of 98 in pass rush win rate. And those were lows for him, which I think is a little bit part of the Wink Martindale scheme. But they're not far off of the rest of his career. He's always been bottom league, so it's not like this guy gets away from Wink Martindale and all of a sudden he's getting, 4 sacks and 7 QB hits and 15 pressures. Like he's very much a 1 to 2 sack, 3 QB hits and 10 pressures in a season type of player.
Do you think the way that Shane Bowen is going to call a run defense, I'm not going to say is it going to benefit Nacho, but do you think it's going to make like an interior defensive lineman like Nacho more excited to defend the run and maybe make some more plays, or less excited?
I think it gives any defensive lineman more excitement because it allows you to be the guy who makes the stop. But for Nacho, he's just never someone, even if he's doing his job exactly the way you want him to do, he's just never going to be someone that gets you box score. Like, hey, get the 5 tackles for a loss that you had in 2022, right?
Yeah.
You get 5 tackles for a loss, 20 plus run stops. No one's singing your praises, but you did your job.
Yeah.
So
you'll get paid. You'll get paid next year if you do that.
Yeah, and that's what I want out of him. Obviously, it's a weak position for the Giants, but it seems like he is their starter right now. So, all right, anything else, Justin?
Nope, that's it. Nacho. You know what goes good with nachos?
Captain Morgan.
Captain Morgan.
That's actually not wrong at all. All right, we'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, let's go Big Blue.